The morning after that pivotal evening on the porch, Marcus woke with a sense of both excitement and uncertainty. Everything had changed, yet nothing had changed. They still had a ranch to run, work to do, problems to solve. But now they were doing it as something more than employer and employees, more than just friends. They were embarking on a journey together into uncharted territory. Over breakfast, which they now always shared at Marcus's kitchen table, they talked practically about what their new arrangement would look like. It was Nayeli who suggested they move slowly, let things develop naturally, rather than trying to force some predetermined structure onto their relationship. "We don't need to have everything figured out right away," she said. "Let's just be honest with each other, communicate openly, and see how things unfold." Ayanna agreed. "The most important thing is that we all feel valued and heard. If something bothers any of us, we talk about it immediately. No festering resentments, no unspoken expectations." Marcus found their approach both refreshing and slightly intimidating. He'd never been in a relationship with this level of intentional communication, and he worried about doing it wrong. But both women were patient with him, gently calling him out when he retreated into silence instead of expressing concerns, and praising him when he managed to voice difficult feelings. The physical aspect of their relationship developed gradually and naturally. It started with more frequent touches, held hands during evening walks, kisses goodnight that grew longer and more passionate. They were careful to ensure that Marcus spent time alone with each of them, recognizing that while they were building something together as a trio, the individual connections between each pair also mattered. Marcus discovered that his relationship with Ayanna had a different flavor than his relationship with Nayeli, even though he loved them both deeply. Ayanna challenged him, pushed him out of his comfort zone, made him think about things in new ways. Their conversations were often debates, passionate exchanges of ideas that left them both energized. Nayeli, on the other hand, brought him peace. With her, he could be quiet, could process his thoughts without feeling pressured to perform or explain. She understood his silences as well as his words. The twins, for their part, never seemed jealous of the time Marcus spent with the other. Their bond was so strong, so secure, that they genuinely seemed to take joy in each other's happiness. If Marcus and Ayanna stayed up late talking on the porch, Nayeli would smile and head to bed with a goodnight kiss for them both. If Marcus and Nayeli spent an afternoon working together in the far pasture, Ayanna would greet them on their return with genuine warmth and interest in how their day had gone. The ranch continued to flourish under their combined efforts. Word got around town that the Henderson place was making a comeback, and other ranchers started stopping by to see what Marcus was doing differently. He always gave credit to Ayanna and Nayeli, introducing them as his partners in the operation. Some people raised eyebrows at the term partners, clearly wondering if it meant more than just business. But Marcus found he didn't care. 3 months into their new arrangement, Marcus received notice from the bank that his mortgage was current, and his account showed positive activity for the first time in 2 years. It was a small victory, but an important one. That evening they celebrated with a special dinner that Ayanna and Nayeli prepared together, a feast of traditional Apache dishes that their mother had taught them to make. As they ate, Marcus looked at these two women who had transformed his life so completely and felt overwhelming gratitude. "I want to say something," he began, setting down his fork. "Before you both came here, I was drowning, not just financially but spiritually. I'd lost hope, lost my sense of purpose. I was just going through the motions, waiting for the inevitable end." "Marcus," Ayanna started, but he held up a hand. "Let me finish. You saved me, not just by helping with the work, though that's been crucial, but by reminding me that life can be full and rich and meaningful, by showing me that unconventional doesn't mean wrong, and that the bravest thing we can do is follow our hearts even when the path isn't clear." Nayeli reached across the table and took his hand. "You saved us too. We were drifting, Marcus. We had no direction, no home, no purpose. You gave us all of that. You gave us a place to put down roots and room to grow. And you gave us yourself," Ayanna added. "Your trust, your vulnerability, your willingness to try something that scared you. That's a gift we don't take lightly." They spent the rest of the evening planning for the ranch's future. Marcus wanted to expand the herd, maybe add some horses like Nayeli's mother used to raise. Ayanna suggested they could diversify, perhaps add a small organic vegetable operation that they could sell at the farmer's market in town. Nayeli thought they should invest in solar panels to reduce operating costs and make the ranch more sustainable. These weren't just dreams anymore. They were actual possibilities, plans they could implement because they had the resources and, more importantly, because they had each other. Later that night, as they sat together under the stars that had become their regular ending to each day, Marcus felt a contentment he'd never known before. The ranch was saved. The bank was satisfied. The cattle were healthy and multiplying. But more than any of that, he had found something he hadn't even known he was missing. "I love you both," he said suddenly, the words he'd been holding back finally breaking free. "I don't know if I'm supposed to say it differently or separately, but that's how I feel it. One love that encompasses both of you." Ayanna kissed his cheek. "We love you too, and you're saying it exactly right. Love isn't meant to be limited or divided," Nayeli said softly. "It's meant to grow and expand and include. Our mother taught us that. She said that the heart has infinite capacity if we're brave enough to open it fully." "Your mother sounds like she was a wise woman," Marcus said. "She was," Ayanna agreed, "and I think she'd be happy to see us now. Happy that we found someone who sees us clearly and loves us wholly. Happy that we're building something real and lasting." Marcus pulled them both closer, one woman tucked under each arm. The night air was cool and crisp, carrying the scent of growing things and the promise of rain. In the distance, he could hear the cattle settling down for the night, their low calls a reassuring sound that spoke of life and continuity. "What do you think the future holds for us?" Marcus asked. The weeks that followed were a time of careful exploration and growing trust. True to their word, Ayanna and Nayeli didn't push for anything dramatic or immediate. Instead, things evolved naturally, almost imperceptibly. A hand on the shoulder that lingered a moment longer than necessary. Sitting closer together during evening meals. Conversations that stretched late into the night. Moving from the practical matters of the ranch to deeper topics about hopes and fears, and the nature of connection. Marcus found himself amazed at how well they communicated, all three of them. There was a transparency to their interactions that he'd never experienced before. When something felt uncomfortable or confusing, they talked about it. When someone needed space, they asked for it without guilt or drama. It was a kind of emotional maturity that Marcus had always thought was rare, but with Ayanna and Nayeli it seemed to come naturally. The ranch continued to improve. The irrigation system was fully operational now, and the grass in the eastern and southern pastures was growing thick and green. Marcus had even been able to buy 3 new calves from a neighboring rancher, thanks to money saved by having Ayanna and Nayeli's help instead of having to hire expensive contractors for repairs. One Saturday evening, about 6 weeks after the twins had arrived, Nayeli suggested they take a break from work and drive into town for supplies and maybe a meal at the local diner. It would be the first time all 3 of them had been seen together in public, and Marcus felt a flutter of nervousness about it. "People will talk," he said, voicing the concern that had been nagging at him. "Let them," Ayanna said with a shrug. "We're 3 adults who work together and are having dinner. There's nothing scandalous about that." She was right, of course, but Marcus still felt self-conscious as they walked into the diner. The town was small enough that everyone knew everyone else's business, and Marcus could feel eyes on them as they took a booth in the corner. He saw Jim Patterson, who owned the feed store, elbow his wife and whisper something. Betty Collins, the town gossip, stared openly from her counter seat. "Just ignore them," Nayeli said quietly, reading his discomfort. They ordered food and tried to have a normal conversation, but Marcus was hyper-aware of being watched. It wasn't until they were halfway through their meal that Tom Rodriguez, an old friend of Marcus's father, stopped by their table. "Marcus," Tom said, nodding a greeting. "Haven't seen you in town for a while. How's the ranch?" "Getting better, actually," Marcus said, relieved to talk to a friendly face. "Tom, these are my employees, Ayanna and Nayeli Yazi. They've been helping me get things back on track." Tom shook hands with both women, his weathered face creasing in a smile. "Well, that's good to hear. Your father would be proud, Marcus. He never gave up on that place, and neither should you." He tipped his hat to the women. "Nice to meet you both. Take care of this one. He works too hard." After Tom left, Marcus felt some of the tension leave his shoulders. Maybe not everyone in town was going to judge them. Maybe some people would just see what Tom saw. 3 people working together to save a struggling ranch. They finished their meal and headed to the feed store for supplies. As they loaded bags of feed and other necessities into the truck, Marcus felt lighter than he had in years. It wasn't just about the ranch improving, or even about his growing feelings for Ayanna and Nayeli. It was about having a sense of purpose again, of not facing everything alone. On the drive back to the ranch, Nayeli sat between Marcus and Ayanna in the truck's bench seat. The sun was setting, painting the desert landscape in shades of gold and crimson. They rode in comfortable silence for a while, the radio playing softly in the background. "Thank you for today," Nayeli said suddenly. "I know it wasn't easy for you being in town with us." "It was fine," Marcus said, and he meant it. "I think I was worried about nothing. Most people were friendly or at least neutral. And if they weren't?" Ayanna asked from the passenger side. "Would it matter?" Marcus thought about the question seriously. A few months ago, he would have said yes, that the opinions of the townspeople mattered a great deal. But now, with everything he'd been through and everything he'd learned about what really mattered, his answer was different. "No," he said firmly, "it wouldn't matter. What happens on my ranch between consenting adults who care about each other, that's nobody's business but ours." He felt Nayeli's hand slip into his, her fingers interlacing with his own. On his other side, even though she couldn't reach his hand while he was driving, Ayanna placed her hand on his shoulder, a gesture of solidarity and affection. When they got back to the ranch, they unloaded the supplies together in the fading light. By the time they finished, stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky, and a cool breeze had picked up, bringing relief from the day's heat. "I don't want tonight to end," Ayanna said as they stood by the truck. "It's been such a good day." "It doesn't have to end," Marcus heard himself say. "We could sit out on the porch, talk for a while. Maybe I could make some coffee." They ended up on Marcus's porch, sitting close together on the old bench his grandfather had built. The coffee sat forgotten on the railing as they talked and laughed, sharing stories and dreams under the vast canopy of stars. At some point, the conversation shifted to more serious territory. Ayanna asked Marcus what he wanted from life beyond saving the ranch. It was a question he'd been avoiding asking himself for years. "I used to think saving the ranch was enough," Marcus said slowly, "that if I could just keep this place going, honor my family's legacy, that would be a full life. But lately I've been thinking there should be more. Connection, companionship, maybe even a family of my own someday." "What's stopping you?" Nayeli asked softly. "Fear mostly," Marcus admitted. "Fear of failing, of not being enough, of losing what matters. But I'm learning that fear is just another form of drought. It dries up everything good if you let it." Ayanna leaned her head against his shoulder. "You know what I think? I think you're braver than you give yourself credit for. You've kept fighting for this place when most people would have walked away. You took a chance on two strangers when you could barely feed yourself. That's not fear. That's courage." "Ayanna's right," Nayeli added. "And courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about doing what matters despite the fear." Marcus felt emotion welling up in his chest. These two women saw him in a way no one else ever had. They saw his struggles, but also his strength. They saw his doubts, but also his determination. They saw all of him, the good and the bad, and they were still here. "I need to tell you both something," Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. "These past weeks, working with you, getting to know you, I've felt more alive than I have in years. You've given me back something I didn't even know I'd lost. Hope, purpose. The feeling that life can be more than just surviving. You've given us something too," Ayanna said. "A place to belong. A purpose. Someone who sees us as individuals, not just as a matched set that people find curious or strange. Our whole lives, people have treated us as a unit," Nayeli explained. "Like we were one person split in two. They either wanted to separate us or use our bond as some kind of novelty. But you see us both as whole people. You appreciate our connection without reducing us to it." Marcus turned to look at them both in the starlight. "How could I see you any other way? You're both remarkable, strong and kind and intelligent. The fact that you're also connected to each other so deeply, that's just another amazing thing about you." There was a charged moment of silence. Then Ayanna spoke, her voice quiet but steady. "Marcus, I think it's time we were completely honest about what we want." "I think so too," Nayeli agreed. Marcus's heart was pounding. "Okay," Ayanna took a deep breath. "We want you, both of us. Not as an employer or a friend, though you're those things too. We want to be with you in every way. We want to build a life with you here on this ranch. We want to wake up with you and work beside you and fall asleep with you. Together. All three of us." "We know it's unconventional," Nayeli continued. We know society doesn't really have a framework for relationships like this, but we don't care about convention. We care about authenticity, about following what feels true and right, and this feels right. Marcus felt like he was standing at a crossroads. One path led back to safety, to the familiar loneliness he'd known for years. The other path led into unknown territory, a landscape without maps or guideposts. But on that path were two women who had already proven they could weather storms beside him. "I want that too," he said, the words coming out rough with emotion. "I want all of that. With both of you. I don't know how to make it work, but I want to try." Ayana leaned in and kissed him soft and sweet. When she pulled back, Nayeli did the same, her kiss gentle and full of promise. Then they were all standing, wrapped in an embrace that felt like coming home. The sun beat down mercilessly on the cracked earth of the old Henderson ranch, turning the dusty ground into something that looked more like broken pottery than soil. Marcus Henderson stood at the edge of his property, surveying the land that had been in his family for 3 generations. His grandfather had built the main house with his own hands back in 1947, and his father had expanded the ranch to nearly 200 acres during the prosperous years. Now Marcus could barely keep 50 acres functional. The drought had been relentless for 2 straight years. The cattle he once proudly raised had dwindled from a herd of 60 down to just 12 scraggly animals that looked more like walking skeletons than beef stock. The bank had already sent 3 notices about the mortgage, and Marcus knew he was running out of time. He was 34 years old, and the ranch was all he had ever known. The thought of losing it felt like losing a piece of his own soul. Marcus walked back toward the barn, his boots kicking up small clouds of dust with each step. The structure leaned slightly to the left now, another repair he couldn't afford to make. Inside, the air was thick and hot, offering no relief from the afternoon heat. He grabbed a pitchfork and began moving hay, trying to keep his mind occupied with physical work instead of dwelling on his mounting problems. The sound of an engine struggling in the distance made him pause. It wasn't the smooth hum of a modern vehicle, but the rattling, coughing noise of something on its last legs. Marcus stepped out of the barn and shielded his eyes from the sun, looking toward the main road that ran past his property. A battered pickup truck, its paint faded to an indistinct color somewhere between brown and rust, had pulled off to the side of the road. Steam was rising from under the hood. Marcus watched for a moment, debating whether to get involved. He had his own troubles, after all, but his mother had raised him better than to ignore someone in need, especially out here where the nearest town was 15 miles away, and the temperature was climbing toward 100 degrees. He sighed, set down the pitchfork and started walking toward the road. As he got closer, he could see 2 figures standing beside the truck, both looking at the engine with expressions of frustration. They were tall, incredibly tall, and as Marcus approached, he realized they were women. Identical twin women, in fact, with long black hair that fell past their shoulders and features that spoke of Apache heritage. They wore jeans and simple tank tops, both looking tired and concerned. "Need some help?" Marcus called out as he approached. Both women turned to look at him simultaneously, and Marcus felt a strange flutter in his chest. They were beautiful in a way that seemed almost otherworldly, with high cheekbones, deep brown eyes, and an air of quiet strength about them. They had to be at least 6 feet tall, towering over most women and standing eye to eye with Marcus himself. "Our truck overheated," one of them said, her voice carrying a slight accent that Marcus couldn't quite place. "We were trying to make it to Prescott, but I think we pushed it too hard." Marcus nodded and walked over to look at the engine. The radiator was bone dry, and he could see a small crack in the hose that had probably been leaking for miles. "When's the last time you checked your coolant?" The twins looked at each other, and the second one spoke. "We bought the truck 3 days ago in Albuquerque. The man who sold it to us said it was in good condition." Her tone suggested she now doubted that assessment. "Well," he lied, Marcus said bluntly. "This hose is cracked, and without coolant you're not going anywhere. The engine's too hot right now to even try to patch it up. It needs to cool down for a few hours at least." The first twin, who Marcus noticed had a small scar above her left eyebrow that distinguished her from her sister, looked worried. "We don't have a few hours. We have a job interview in Prescott at 5 o'clock. If we don't make it, we lose the opportunity." Marcus checked his watch. It was already past 2. Even if he could get their truck running in an hour, which was optimistic, they'd never make it to Prescott in time. He found himself feeling sorry for them, recognizing in their eyes the same desperation he saw in his own mirror every morning. "Look," he said, making a decision he hoped he wouldn't regret. "My ranch is right there. Why don't you come inside, get out of this heat, and I'll see what I can do about your truck. I've got some spare parts in my shop. Can't promise anything, but I'll try." The twins exchanged another glance, seeming to communicate without words in that way twins often do. Finally, the one with the scar nodded. "That's very kind of you. We don't want to be any trouble." "No trouble," Marcus said, though he wondered if that was entirely true. "I'm Marcus Henderson." "I'm Ayanna," said the one with the scar. "This is my sister, Nayeli. Our last name is Yazzie." They followed Marcus back to the ranch house, and he couldn't help but notice how they moved with a grace that seemed at odds with their height. Most tall people he knew had a slightly awkward gait, but Ayanna and Nayeli walked like dancers, their steps sure and confident despite the uneven ground. The ranch house was small and showed its age in every creaking board and faded paint chip, but it was clean. Marcus had always been meticulous about that, at least. He showed them to the living room, where an old ceiling fan stirred the hot air without really cooling it, and offered them water from the refrigerator. "Please sit down," he said. "I'll go take a look at your truck and see what I can salvage." Nayeli touched his arm gently as he turned to leave. "Thank you, Marcus, really. Not many people would stop to help strangers these days." Marcus felt that flutter in his chest again and gave what he hoped was a casual nod before heading back outside. He spent the next hour working on the truck in the brutal heat, using a spare hose from his own workshop and refilling the radiator with coolant he'd been saving for his own vehicle. As he worked, he found his mind wandering back to the two women in his house. There was something about them that intrigued him beyond their obvious beauty. They carried themselves with a dignity that spoke of strength and resilience, qualities he admired. He wondered what had brought them out here, why they were driving a barely functional truck to a job interview in Prescott, and what their story was. When he finally got the truck running again, the sun was already starting its descent toward the horizon. He checked his watch and frowned. Even if they left right now, they'd never make a 5 o'clock interview. He wiped his hands on a rag and headed back to the house to deliver the bad news. The next few days were awkward. Marcus tried to act normal, but he felt hyper-aware of every interaction with Ayanna and Nayeli. They, on the other hand, seemed perfectly comfortable, going about their work with the same dedication and cheerfulness they'd always shown. If Nayeli knew about the conversation in the barn, she gave no indication of it. Marcus found himself watching them more closely, seeing them in a new light. They were identical in so many ways, but different in others he was only now noticing. Ayanna was the more outspoken of the two, the one who took charge in group situations and made decisions quickly. Nayeli was quieter, more contemplative, but when she did speak, her words carried weight. Ayanna's humor was sharp and quick, while Nayeli's was gentle and subtle. On the 4th day after the barn conversation, Marcus was working on the irrigation system in the far pasture when Nayeli came out to help him. They worked in silence for a while, the only sounds being the clank of tools and the distant lowing of cattle. "Ayanna told me what she said to you," Nayeli finally said, her voice calm and matter-of-fact. Marcus's hands froze on the pipe wrench he was holding. "Oh. She probably scared you," Nayeli continued, kneeling beside him to hand him a fitting he needed. "Ayanna is like a summer storm, all intensity and passion. I'm more like winter snow, quiet and steady, but we feel the same things, Marcus. We always have." Marcus sat back on his heels looking at her. "This doesn't make sense to you? This situation? It makes perfect sense to me that I'd be confused and overwhelmed, but you both seem so calm about it." Nayeli smiled, a sad but understanding expression. "Our mother used to tell us a story. In Apache tradition, there's a belief that some souls are meant to walk together, not just as pairs, but sometimes as groups. She said that love isn't a finite resource that gets divided. It's something that grows and expands to fill whatever space it's given." "That's beautiful," Marcus said quietly. "But this isn't just about love or philosophy. There are practical considerations. What would people say? How would this even work?" "Do you care what people say?" Nayeli asked directly. "You live 15 miles from the nearest town. The few neighbors you have are miles away. This ranch is its own world, Marcus. As for how it would work, that's something we'd figure out together if you're willing to try." Marcus turned back to his work, needing something to do with his hands while he thought. "I've been alone for a long time," he admitted. "After my parents died, I buried myself in trying to save this place. I told myself I didn't have time for relationships, that I needed to focus on survival. But the truth is I was just scared. Scared of losing someone else, scared of failing them the way I felt I'd failed my parents by not being able to keep the ranch going. Nayeli's hand touched his shoulder gently. You didn't fail them. You're still fighting for this place, still trying to honor what they built. That's not failure, and as for losing people, that's always a risk. But isn't it better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all? That's a cliché, Marcus said, but he was smiling slightly. Clichés become clichés because they're true, Nayeli replied. Look, we're not asking you to decide anything right now. We're not even asking you to feel what we feel. We're just saying that if you do feel something, if there's a part of you that wants to explore this, we're open to it. Both of us. She stood up, brushing dirt from her jeans. Think about it. Take all the time you need. Nothing has to change unless you want it to. That evening, the three of them had dinner together as usual. The conversation flowed naturally, touching on everything from the irrigation repairs to the news that one of the cows might be pregnant. To any outside observer, they would have looked like nothing more than three people who worked together, sharing a meal and easy companionship. But Marcus felt the undercurrent now, the awareness that something unspoken was present in the room. He noticed the way Ayana's hand lingered when she passed him the breadbasket, the way Nayeli's eyes met his across the table with a warmth that went beyond friendship. After dinner, as they were cleaning up, Marcus found himself speaking before he'd fully decided to. I need to ask you both something, and I need honest answers. Ayana and Nayeli exchanged their trademark glance, then turned to face him with identical expressions of openness and patience. This attraction you both feel, Marcus began, choosing his words carefully. Is it really for me, or is it partly gratitude? I gave you jobs and a place to stay when you needed it. Are you sure you're not confusing appreciation with something else? Nayeli shook her head firmly. We were grateful from the first day, Marcus. But what we feel now, that's grown over time. It's grown from watching you work until your hands bleed to keep this place alive. From seeing how you gentle with the animals even when you're exhausted. From hearing the dreams you have for this ranch and knowing they're not dreams of wealth or status, but dreams of legacy and meaning. It's grown from your terrible jokes, Ayana added with a grin, from the way you hum off-key when you think no one's listening, from your kindness and your stubbornness and your refusal to give up even when giving up would be easier. We're not children, Nayeli said seriously. We know our own hearts. This isn't gratitude. This is something real. Marcus felt something loosen in his chest, some knot of tension he'd been carrying. Okay, he said softly. Okay, I believe you. And I need to be honest too. I feel something for both of you. I've been fighting it because it seemed wrong somehow, or at least complicated. But it's there, and pretending it isn't is just making me miserable. Ayana stepped closer to him. So what do you want to do about it? I don't know, Marcus admitted. I've never been in a situation like this. I don't know the rules or how it's supposed to work. Maybe there are no rules, Nayeli suggested. Maybe we just take it one day at a time and see where it goes. No pressure, no expectations, just honesty and respect and seeing what develops. Marcus looked at them both, these two remarkable women who had come into his life when he needed them most. They were offering him something he hadn't even known he wanted, something that scared him and excited him in equal measure. One day at a time, he repeated, I can do that. Ayana reached out and took his hand, her fingers warm and strong around his. A moment later, Nayeli took his other hand. They stood there in the kitchen, the three of them connected, and Marcus felt a sense of rightness that was hard to explain but impossible to deny. It's late, Ayana said after a long moment. We should all get some rest. Tomorrow's another big day. They said their goodnights, and Marcus watched as the twins walked back to the guest house together, their silhouettes merging with the darkness. 3 weeks passed in a blur of hard work and gradual progress. Marcus couldn't believe the transformation happening on his ranch. With Ayana and Nayeli's help, he'd managed to repair 2 sections of the irrigation system that had been broken for over a year. Water was flowing again to the eastern pasture, and the grass was actually starting to grow back, thin and tentative, but definitely there. The twins had proven to be even more capable than they'd initially claimed. Nayeli had a gift for working with animals that bordered on magical. The 12 remaining cattle had been skittish and half-wild when she started working with them, but now they came when she called, eating from her hand without fear. She'd even managed to nurse one of the sick calves back to health, something Marcus had thought was impossible. Ayanna had different skills but equally valuable ones. She had a practical mind that saw solutions where Marcus only saw problems. When the tractor broke down, she'd diagnosed the issue and fixed it with parts they'd salvaged from old equipment in the barn. When a section of fence collapsed, she designed a more efficient way to rebuild it that used less material, but was actually stronger than the original. But beyond their work skills, Marcus found himself drawn to them on a personal level. They had a sense of humor that emerged once they'd grown comfortable, often teasing him gently about his bachelor habits or his tendency to be too serious. Dinners had become a shared affair, with the three of them taking turns cooking and eating together at Marcus's kitchen table. He learned more about their lives during those evening meals. They told him stories about growing up on the reservation, about their mother who had been a horse trainer and traditional healer, about the close-knit community they'd left behind. They talked about their dreams too, modest dreams of having their own place someday, of building something lasting. Marcus shared his own stories in return, about his grandparents who'd started the ranch with nothing but determination, about his father who'd expanded it during the good years, about his plans to not just save the ranch but make it thrive again. He found himself talking about things he'd never spoken of before, dreams he'd buried under the weight of his struggles. As the days passed, Marcus became increasingly aware of something he'd been trying to ignore. He was attracted to both of them, not just physically, though they were undeniably beautiful, but to their spirits, their strength, their kindness. It was confusing and a little frightening. He'd had relationships before, of course, but never anything like this. Never feelings for two women at once, and certainly never for twin sisters. He tried to keep things professional, to maintain appropriate boundaries. But it was getting harder. He noticed things he shouldn't notice, like the way Niley's eyes crinkled when she laughed, or how Ayanna bit her lower lip when she was concentrating on something. He caught himself watching them more than was strictly necessary, and he worried they might notice. What made it even more complicated was that he sometimes caught them watching him too. There were moments when he'd look up from his work to find one or both of them looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. It happened often enough that he knew it wasn't his imagination. One evening, about a month after they'd arrived, Marcus was in the barn repairing a saddle when Ayanna came in. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, and the barn was filled with long shadows. "Hey," she said softly, walking over to where he sat on a hay bale. "You missed dinner. Nayeli made stew." "Sorry," Marcus said, not looking up from his work. "I wanted to get this finished." Ayanna sat down beside him, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "You've been distant the last few days. Is everything all right?" Marcus's hand stilled on the saddle. How could he explain what he was feeling? "Yeah, everything's fine. Just a lot on my mind." "Marcus, look at me." He did, and found himself caught by the intensity in her dark eyes. This close, he could see flecks of gold in the brown, could smell the subtle scent of sage that seemed to cling to her skin. "Nayeli and I have been talking," Ayanna said carefully. "We've noticed something. The way you look at us sometimes. The way you've been pulling away lately, like you're afraid of something." Marcus felt his heart begin to race. "I don't know what you mean." "Yes, you do," she said gently. "And here's the thing, Marcus. We've noticed it because we've been doing the same thing. Looking at you. Thinking about you. Wanting things we probably shouldn't want." Marcus couldn't breathe. "Ayanna, let me finish," she interrupted. "This is complicated. I know it is. You're our employer, and we're living on your property, and there are 1,000 reasons why this should stay professional. But Nayeli and I, we've never been good at doing what we're supposed to do instead of what feels right." "What are you saying?" Marcus asked, though part of him already knew. Ayanna took a deep breath. "We're attracted to you, both of us. And we know that sounds strange, maybe even wrong, but it's the truth. We've always been close, Nayeli and I. We've always shared everything. And these feelings for you, they're something we share too." Marcus stood abruptly, needing space to think. "This is crazy. You're twin sisters. You can't both what? Feel something for the same person?" Ayanna stood too, facing him. "Why not? Is there some rule that says twins can't share the same feelings? We've shared everything else our whole lives. Our mother used to say we were two halves of the same soul." Marcus ran his hands through his hair, his mind reeling. "Even if that's true, even if you both feel something, what are you suggesting?" That we all... He couldn't even finish the sentence. I'm not suggesting anything right now, Ayana said. I'm just being honest with you. We're not asking you to make any decisions or do anything. We just wanted you to know the truth. That we see you, Marcus Henderson. We see how hard you work, how much you care about this place, how kind you are despite everything you're dealing with. And we're drawn to that, both of us. She walked toward the barn door, then paused and looked back. Your stew is in the oven keeping warm. Don't stay out here too long. It's going to be a cold night. After she left, Marcus sank back down onto the hay bale, his mind spinning. What had just happened? Ayana had essentially told him that both she and her sister had feelings for him. Romantic feelings. And she'd implied that they were okay with sharing those feelings, sharing him. It was impossible. It went against everything he'd been taught about relationships, about what was normal and acceptable. But as he sat there in the gathering darkness, he couldn't deny the surge of excitement that ran through him at the thought. He was attracted to both of them too, had been fighting those feelings for weeks now. Marcus eventually made his way back to the house. The stew was indeed waiting in the oven, and he ate it mechanically, tasting nothing. His mind was too full of questions and possibilities and fears. Marcus found Ayana and Nayeli sitting at his kitchen table when he returned to the house. They had apparently made themselves useful in his absence, because the dishes he'd left in the sink that morning were now clean and drying on the rack. A pot of coffee was brewing, filling the kitchen with a rich aroma he hadn't smelled in his own home for weeks. He'd been rationing his coffee supply, trying to make it last. You didn't have to do that, Marcus said, gesturing to the clean kitchen. Ayana smiled softly. We don't like sitting idle. It's the least we could do while you worked on our truck in that heat. About that, Marcus said, accepting the cup of coffee Nayeli poured for him. I got it running, but I have to be honest with you. Even if you leave right now, you won't make it to Prescott by 5. It's already close to 4, and the drive is at least 90 minutes. The disappointment on both their faces was immediate and profound. Nayeli sat down heavily, her shoulders slumping. We needed that job. Both of us did. What kind of work was it? Marcus asked, pulling out a chair and joining them at the table. Housekeeping at a resort, Ayana said. It wasn't glamorous, but they were offering room and board along with the salary. We've been looking for work for 3 weeks now, ever since we left the reservation. This was the first place that would hire both of us together. Marcus sipped his coffee, studying them over the rim of his cup. Why'd you leave the reservation? The twins exchanged one of their wordless looks again. Finally, Nayeli spoke. Our mother passed away 6 months ago. She was the only family we had left. After she died, there wasn't much keeping us there. We thought we'd find better opportunities elsewhere. I'm sorry about your mother, Marcus said, and he meant it. He knew what it was like to lose family. His own parents had died in a car accident 5 years ago, leaving him the ranch and a mountain of debt. What about you? Ayana asked, clearly wanting to change the subject. This ranch seems like a lot of work for one person. Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. It is too much work, honestly. My family used to run cattle here, had a real operation going, but the drought killed most of the herd, and I've been struggling to keep things afloat. Bank's breathing down my neck about the mortgage, and I'm running out of options. He wasn't sure why he was being so honest with these strangers. Maybe it was because they had shared their own troubles with him, or maybe it was just the relief of finally saying out loud what he'd been holding inside for so long. Nayeli leaned forward, her dark eyes intense. How much land do you have? About 50 acres that are still usable. The rest has pretty much turned to dust. And what do you need to keep the ranch? Ayana asked. Marcus ran a hand through his hair, feeling suddenly tired. Money, mainly. I need to pay off 3 months of back mortgage, repair the irrigation system, and somehow rebuild my herd. But that's impossible without help, and I can't afford to hire anyone. The twins looked at each other again, and Marcus was starting to recognize that this was how they made decisions together. Some silent conversation passed between them, full of meaning he couldn't interpret. What if we stayed and helped you? Nayeli said suddenly. Marcus blinked, not sure he'd heard correctly. What? We need work and a place to stay, Ayana explained. You need help with the ranch. We could work for you. We're strong. We're not afraid of hard work, and we learn quickly. I told you I can't pay much, Marcus said, though his mind was already racing with possibilities. 2 extra sets of hands could make a real difference. He could get the irrigation system repaired, clear out the overgrown fields, maybe even start rebuilding. You said room and board, Nayeli pointed out. That's all we were going to get from the resort anyway. Feed us. Give us a place to sleep and whatever you can spare beyond that. We'll make it work. Marcus studied them both carefully. They looked sincere, but he'd been burned before by people who made promises they couldn't keep. This isn't easy work. It's dawn to dusk, sometimes longer. It's hot, it's dirty, and it's exhausting. We grew up on the reservation, Ayanna said firmly. We know hard work. Our mother raised horses and we helped her from the time we could walk. We can handle whatever this ranch throws at us. Something in her voice convinced Marcus. Maybe it was desperation on his part. Or maybe it was something else, some instinct that told him these women were different. Whatever it was, he found himself nodding. All right, let's try it for a week. If it works out, we'll make it more permanent. I've got a guest house out back. It's small and needs some cleaning, but it's got 2 bedrooms, a bathroom, and a kitchenette. It's yours if you want it. The relief and gratitude on their faces made Marcus feel like he'd done something right for the first time in months. They spent the next hour making plans. Marcus showed them around the ranch, pointing out what needed to be done and what equipment they had to work with. The twins asked intelligent questions and made suggestions that showed they actually did understand ranch work. By the time the sun was setting, Marcus had given them the keys to the guest house and helped them carry their few belongings from their truck. They didn't have much, just 2 duffel bags and a box of what looked like personal items. It made Marcus's heart ache a little, seeing how little they had in the world. We'll start fresh tomorrow morning, he told them as they stood outside the guest house. 5 o'clock good for you? We'll be ready, Nayeli promised. Marcus walked back to the main house as the last light faded from the sky. He made himself a simple dinner of beans and rice, thinking about the strange turn his day had taken. This morning he'd been alone and hopeless. Tonight he had 2 employees he couldn't really afford, and a spark of something he was afraid to call hope. The next morning, Marcus was up at 4:30, making coffee and preparing for the day's work. At exactly 5 o'clock, there was a knock on his door. When he opened it, he found Ayanna and Nayeli standing there in work clothes, their hair tied back, looking ready and determined. Good morning, Ayanna said with a smile. Where do we start? Marcus couldn't help but smile back. Come on in. Let's have some coffee and go over the plan. They worked together all that first day, and Marcus was impressed. The twins were as strong as they'd claimed, lifting and carrying things that would have given many men trouble. They worked steadily without complaint, even when the temperature climbed and sweat soaked through their shirts. By the end of the day, they'd accomplished more than Marcus had managed alone in the previous week. That first day set the pattern for the days that followed. They fell into a rhythm, the 3 of them working side by side from dawn to dusk. Marcus found himself looking forward to mornings, to the knock on his door at 5 o'clock, and the shared coffee before work began. Ayanna and Nayeli brought a new energy to the ranch, a sense of purpose and possibility that had been missing. 2 years passed, and the transformation of the Henderson Ranch was nothing short of remarkable. What had once been a dying operation struggling to survive was now a thriving, sustainable enterprise that other ranchers visited to learn from. The herd had grown to 40 healthy cattle, and Nayeli's horse training program had become so successful that people were driving in from 3 counties away to buy her gentle, well-trained animals. Ayanna's vegetable operation had exceeded even her own optimistic projections. The organic produce they grew was in high demand at farmers markets and local restaurants. She'd implemented innovative irrigation techniques and companion planting strategies that maximized yield, while minimizing water usage, crucial in their drought-prone region. Marcus had taken on a consulting role with the County Agricultural Extension Office, helping other struggling ranchers implement sustainable practices. It gave him immense satisfaction to share what he'd learned, to help others avoid the near-catastrophic losses he'd experienced. But beyond the professional successes, it was the personal growth that meant the most to Marcus. Living with Ayanna and Nayeli had taught him things about himself he'd never known. He'd learned that he was capable of deeper emotional intimacy than he'd ever imagined. He'd learned that love didn't diminish when shared, but rather multiplied. He'd learned that family could be created, not just inherited. The town had eventually accepted their unconventional arrangement, or at least stopped openly commenting on it. They were known as Marcus and his partners, and whether people understood the full nature of their relationship or not, they couldn't argue with the success the 3 of them had built together. Respect, Marcus had learned, came from results, not conformity. One spring morning, Marcus woke to find both Ayanna and Nayeli already up, which was unusual. He found them in the kitchen, their faces showing a mixture of excitement and nervousness that immediately put him on alert. "What's going on?" he asked, accepting the coffee Ayanna poured for him. The twins exchanged one of their silent communications, then Nayeli spoke. "We have something to tell you. Something important." Marcus's heart began to race. Had they decided to leave? Had he done something wrong? Despite 2 years of stability, his old fears could still surface quickly. Ayanna must have seen the panic on his face because she quickly took his hand. "It's good news, Marcus. At least we think it's good news. We hope you'll think so too." "I'm pregnant," Nayeli said simply. Marcus felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. "What? How?" "I mean, I know how, but we stopped using birth control 3 months ago," Ayanna explained. "We'd been talking about it for a while, Nayeli and I, about whether we wanted children, whether this was the right time, whether you'd want to be a father. We should have discussed it with you first," Nayeli added quickly. "We know that, but we were scared you might say no if we asked, and we wanted it so badly that we decided to just see what happened. If it happened, we'd tell you and hope you'd be happy. If it didn't, we wouldn't have put pressure on you about something you might not want." Marcus sat down heavily, his mind spinning. A baby. There was going to be a baby. He was going to be a father. The ranch was going to have another generation. "Say something," Ayanna pleaded. "You're scaring us." Marcus looked up at them both, and suddenly he was laughing, tears streaming down his face. "I'm going to be a dad. We're going to have a baby. This is incredible." The relief on their faces was palpable. Nayeli sat down beside him, taking his hand and placing it on her still flat stomach. "You're really happy? You're not angry that we didn't ask first?" "I'm ecstatic," Marcus said honestly. "And yeah, you should have told me you were thinking about this. We're supposed to communicate, remember? But I understand why you were scared. And I'm not angry. I'm just overwhelmed, in the best possible way." Ayanna knelt in front of him, her eyes serious. "Marcus, we need to be clear about something. This baby, he or she, won't know any different than having 3 parents. That's what we're offering. Full equal parenting. All 3 of us. I wouldn't want it any other way," Marcus said firmly. "This child will be ours. All of ours." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, and Marcus found himself marveling at the changes in Nayeli's body, the way she seemed to glow with an inner light. Ayanna became fiercely protective, taking on more of the physical labor and insisting that Nayeli rest more, though Nayeli protested that she wasn't fragile. They spent evenings planning for the baby's arrival. They converted one of the spare bedrooms in the main house into a nursery, painting it in soft earth tones and decorating it with Apache symbols that Ayanna and Nayeli's mother had taught them. Marcus built a crib with his own hands using wood from an old oak tree that had fallen on the property, wanting his child to have something that connected them to the land. Marcus found himself thinking often about his own parents, wishing they could be here to meet their grandchild. But in a way, they would be present. The ranch that had been their dream, that 3 generations of Hendersons had worked to build and maintain, would now pass to a 4th generation. The legacy would continue. 7 months into the pregnancy, Marcus was working in the barn when Ayanna came running in, her face pale with fear. "It's Nayeli. Something's wrong. She's bleeding." Marcus's world narrowed to a single point of focus. They rushed Nayeli to the hospital in town, Marcus driving faster than he ever had before while Ayanna sat in the back seat with her sister, holding her hand and murmuring reassurances in Apache. The hours at the hospital were the longest of Marcus's life. Doctors came and went, their faces professionally neutral, giving updates that said everything and nothing. Possible placental abruption. Monitoring vital signs. Wait and see. Marcus sat with Ayanna in the waiting room, both of them holding hands so tightly their fingers went numb. "She has to be okay," Ayanna whispered. "Both of them have to be okay. I can't lose her, Marcus. She's my other half." "They'll be okay," Marcus said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "Nayeli's strong. The baby's strong. They're fighters, both of them." After what felt like an eternity, a doctor emerged with a tired but genuine smile. "Good news. We've stabilized her. The baby's heartbeat is strong. We're going to keep her here for observation for a few days, but I think they're both going to be fine. She was very lucky you got her here when you did." The relief was so intense that Marcus thought his legs might give out. Ayanna was crying openly, tears of joy streaming down her face. They were allowed to see Nayeli, and finding her pale but smiling in the hospital bed, hooked up to monitors but clearly alive and well, was one of the best moments of Marcus's life. "Sorry for scaring you," Nayeli said weakly as they gathered around her bed. "Don't you dare apologize," Ayana said fiercely. "Just focus on getting better. You and this baby." The scare served as a reminder of how precious and fragile life could be. When Nayeli was finally released from the hospital with orders for bed rest, Marcus and Ayana treated her like she was made of glass. They wouldn't let her do anything more strenuous than sitting in a comfortable chair, waiting on her hand and foot. 2 months later, on a cool autumn morning, Nayeli went into labor. Marcus and Ayana were with her every step of the way, Ayana holding one hand and Marcus holding the other. The delivery was long and difficult, but when they finally heard that first cry, the sound of their daughter announcing her arrival into the world, everything else fell away. She was perfect. Tiny and wrinkled and absolutely perfect. They named her Sarah after Marcus's mother, with the middle name Kaya, which Ayana and Nayeli said meant my wise elder sister in Apache. Holding his daughter for the first time, Marcus felt a completeness he'd never known existed. This tiny person was the culmination of everything he'd worked for, everything he'd survived, every risk he'd taken. She was the future of the ranch, the continuation of a legacy. But more than that, she was living proof that love in all its forms could create something beautiful. As Sarah grew, she was surrounded by the love of 3 devoted parents. She learned to walk on the ranch land, chasing after the chickens Ayana had added to their operation. She learned to be gentle with animals from Nayeli, who let her help feed the horses as soon as she was old enough. She learned about the land and its history from Marcus, who took her on walks around the property and told her stories about her grandparents and great-grandparents. The ranch became more than just a business or a piece of land. It became a true home, filled with laughter and love in the daily chaos of raising a child. Neighbors who had once whispered about the unusual arrangement now stopped by to see Sarah, commenting on how happy and well-adjusted she seemed. On Sarah's 3rd birthday, as they celebrated with a small party on the ranch, Marcus stood back and watched his family. Ayana was helping Sarah blow out her candles while Nayeli took pictures, everyone laughing as Sarah tried to eat the frosting directly with her hands. Other ranching families had come to celebrate, people who had become true friends over the years. Tom Rodriguez, Marcus's father's old friend, came over to stand beside him. "You've built something special here, Marcus. Not just the ranch, though that's impressive enough, but your family, the life you've created. Your parents would be proud." Marcus felt emotion welling up in his chest. "I hope so. None of this would have been possible without Ayana and Nayeli. They saved me when I was drowning." Tom smiled. "Maybe you saved each other. That's what family does. That's what love does." As the sun set over the ranch that evening, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple, Marcus gathered his family close. Sarah sat on his lap, already drowsy from the excitement of her party. Ayana and Nayeli sat on either side of him, the 4 of them watching the day fade into night. "Tell me the story again, Daddy," Sarah said sleepily. "About how you met Mama Nayeli and Mama Ayana." Marcus smiled, exchanging warm glances with both women. "Well, it was a very hot day, and their truck broke down by the side of the road." As he told the story, leaving out some details but keeping the essential truth, Marcus reflected on how far they'd all come. From desperation and near defeat to prosperity and joy. From loneliness to a love more expansive than he'd ever imagined possible. The ranch that had nearly defeated him was now thriving. The family he'd thought he'd lost when his parents died had been rebuilt in a form he never could have predicted. And the future, which had once seemed so bleak and uncertain, now stretched out before them full of promise and possibility. Sarah fell asleep in his arms as the last light faded from the sky, and Marcus carried her inside to tuck her into the crib he'd built with his own hands. Ayana and Nayeli followed, and together they stood looking down at their sleeping daughter, this perfect little person they'd created together. "I love our life," Nayeli whispered. "So do I," Ayana agreed. "Me too," Marcus said, wrapping an arm around each of them. "More than I ever thought possible." Outside, the ranch settled into its evening rhythms. The cattle lowed softly in the distance. The horses rustled in their stalls. The land, which had weathered droughts and hardships and the passage of generations, held steady beneath it all, a solid foundation for whatever the future might bring. And in the main house, three people who had found each other against all odds, who had built something beautiful from desperation and hope, held each other close and knew they were exactly where they were meant to be.